They put on their uniform and they came back a bit different. Hundreds of thousands of reservists were drafted after October 7th. Many of them did not come back the same.
This kind of fear to this extent is not anything that I have experienced before. Since then, my emotions are mixed. You sit at home not quite understanding what you returned for, not quite understanding what you went through. Everything is unclear.
For some, this time period, which seems to have no end in sight, led to a personal turning point, affecting their personal lives and even their workplaces. Raz Weiserbin, a senior sales manager in high-tech, dreamt and waited for an exit. After shedding his uniform and returning home, where his firstborn daughter awaited him, he parted from the path he had walked in for many years. Instead, he chose a new direction in the social and political arena.
If in the past I said I would reach to a point where I would do the high-tech exit and then move to a social political work, when I returned, I felt uncertain whether there would still be a country to come and to do this in, even if the high-tech exit comes in 10 years.
Currently, Raz is part of the Fourth Quarter movement, which aims, as they define it, to create a discourse of partnership among all sectors of Israeli society.
On a personal level, I felt we are in a historical crossroad. Either we go back to the bad old habits that led us nowhere, or we make a change. After the reserve period, I know that for my daughter, for myself, I want to invest my energy in a movement that can change reality in Israel.
Uri Ohan, a project manager from Tel Aviv, had planned to move to Australia. The emergency call-up order he received in October interrupted and changed his big dreams.
After the release from reserves, everything seemed trivial to me. Then I really got involved in a social project that interested and attracted me. The only thing that makes me feel good since the reserves, and what I'm able to stick with, is work.
The meanings sought by discharged reservists are diverse. Yotam Ben-Zvi was discharged last February from a prolonged reserve service as a senior non-commissioned officer of a reserve brigade at a training base.
After this extreme experience, it gave me a new perspective. How do I continue from here? It was a wake-up call to go and do what I really want to do.
Just before the war, Yotam left a job at My Wave Association and was searching for his path as an independent. The pause imposed by the reserves led him to choose his true passion, treating people through circular breathing.
I try to guide them to live a life more suited to them. It might sound like a cliché, but we are truly a country that needs a treatment. I was deep in Gaza during Operation Protective Edge, and I know that to this day, the experience I went through there stay with me.
For Tom Solan, an education officer who was discharged after months in the reserves in the south, the war service was a significant push to leave his architecture profession.
In war, the days are so intensive and busy. You constantly think about the next step, and the next step could already be in the evening. The dissonance between being in a war and doing significant work to suddenly returning to a routine where things take time, I realized I need to work at a much higher pace.
For many reservists, the tumultuous service period was a gateway or a catalyst to leaving their jobs, changing professions, or even re-evaluating their life paths. And perhaps the urge or push for a change during the war period.
I know many employees had questions, a feeling of maybe I'm not in the right place, maybe this isn't my calling. Ultimately, after a few months, most people returned to their regular routines and reintegrated into their workplaces, and only a relative minority decided and made a career change. During this period, people felt they were doing something very meaningful, no matter if it was a combat soldier or someone responsible for a supply chain. They felt they were contributing and doing something with significance, and returning to a regular job, interesting as it might be, was perceived differently.
Companies and organizations indicate that from an economic perspective, it is still a marginal phenomenon. However, they estimate that the results of the seeds of change emerging from the blood-soaked ground in Israel for 9 months now, both as a nation and as individuals, will be seen in the not-too-distant future on a much larger scale.